Hi and welcome to another episode of Delaware County Political News, Meet the Expert. I am your host, Larry DeMarco, and today we are here with Dr. Joan Duvall-Flynn, President of the NAACP Pennsylvania State Conference. Dr. Duvall-Flynn is serving in her second term. In her capacity, she monitors the work of the state authorized committees and speaks for the positions of the NAACP Pennsylvania on issues of concern to the state conference of branches. Duvall-Flynn's career as an educator spans 40 years and includes teaching experience ranging from preschool through graduate school. She has also held the position of State Conference Education Committee Chair for more than a decade. As such, Dr. Flynn advocates for equity in public education at the state policy level. She provides the NAACP position on policy issues, meets with lawmakers in Harrisburg on behalf of the needs of the poor and minority children, and offers testimony to legislative committees. She also works to resolve school problems in specific cases where a complaint is received by the state conference. Please enjoy my interview with Dr. Joan Duvall-Flynn. Dr. Duvall-Flynn, thank you for being a guest on Delaware County Political News.
Thank you for having me, Larry.
What is the structure of the NAACP?
The NAACP is a worldwide organization. We are divided into 7 regions, organized under a national association. And within the regions, there are states that form the region. And within each state, there are local branches that form state conferences. So small to great, we are local branch, state conference, one of 7 regions, and then the National Association. There are NAACP branches on military bases wherever U.S. citizens are, so they are parts of different regions.
You mentioned there's a worldwide organization. Mm-hmm. My next question was the role of the national branch, but is there a larger branch than the national branch?
No, the National Association is the association, and we are all parts of that. But on military bases abroad, there are NAACP chapters or branches.
Thank you for clarifying.
Mm-hmm.
So what is the role of the national branch?
Well, the National Association, comprised of our executive board, sets the final policy for the work of the NAACP. Policy is introduced at the National Convention each year through resolutions from states or branches. Then at their meeting in October or February, the National Board ratifies the resolutions that are passed at National Convention, and they become the work that we are to do. Those resolutions become, for instance, right now, last summer in Baltimore, Pennsylvania had introduced a resolution that gun violence be declared a public health crisis. That resolution passed unanimously. In October, it was approved by the board, and we are now to work to achieve that in each state and nationally.
The next level, did you say, is regional
Mm-hmm.
boards or conferences? What is their role?
Well, the regional director is a monitoring and helping step between the state conference and the national board. So in our region, Region 2, we're Connecticut, New England states, New York, Delaware, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania.
And what's it called, Northeast?
No,
The
the New England states in the north, Connecticut, and New York State, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware.
I'm sorry, what's the identification of this region?
Region 2.
Region 2. Okay, just a numerical. I'm sorry. Got you.
Yeah. So that comprises the region. When we meet at National Convention, then each region meets in caucus and addresses regional issues.
Where state presidents also
The state
caucus.
presidents all are attending, and the delegates that are elected to go to the National Convention, each branch can elect delegates to the National Convention.
So what is the role of then each state branch?
Well, each state is to oversee the work of the past resolutions. We have this resolution on gun violence. We also, 2 years ago, Pennsylvania introduced a resolution calling for trauma-informed education systems across the country. And so in Pennsylvania, we have worked diligently to achieve a trauma-informed education system. Happily, we have been heard. And the Secretary of Education, the Assistant Secretary of Education for Pennsylvania, are now holding discussions even with other departments about being trauma-informed. As a matter of fact, I spoke with Assistant Secretary Volkman just on Friday, and he's holding those discussions this week. At the same time, we have met with Senator Denneman to discuss work we have been doing over the past year with educators to identify what a trauma-focused education system ought to look like. And we've taken those policy suggestions to him. We are going to see other legislators with them. And we're looking forward to achieving a trauma-informed, trauma-focused education system in the state of Pennsylvania.
And Doctor, what's the role of the local branches throughout each state?
Local branches receive complaints of civil rights violations from individuals. Local branches are chartered within a physical jurisdiction. For instance, I belong to the media area branch of the NAACP, which services even Wallingford, from Springfield to Chadsford, and from Aston to Cheney is the jurisdiction of the media area unit. When people within those regions believe that their civil rights have been violated, and when they call us, there are several things we can do. If the complaint falls under a legislated entity, such as the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission or the Department of Justice or the Office for Civil Rights under the U.S. Department of Education, we can refer people to file complaints through those agencies. We can help them fill out a complaint if they're not sure how to do it. We can go with them to a mediation hearing as an advocate to, be with them while they go through that mediation. We are local volunteers in the media area in NAACP. There are about 200 members, and we are all volunteer advocates.
What is your personal role and duties as president of the Pennsylvania branch?
Okay. As president of the Pennsylvania State Conference,
Thank you.
I quite frequently hear from local branches who have policy practice questions. As the state conference president, I do things such as have this conversation with you about the NAACP. Mm-hmm. I write op-eds. I write letters to the editor concerning the issues that we're advocating on. I do public speaking. Right now, I've been doing a series of workshops because I have a dual role as the state education chair. And these workshops have been calling for trauma-informed, trauma-focused education system, teaching people how trauma impacts the school culture. It impacts the children, it impacts the teachers, and the entire school community is impacted when there's high level of trauma in the children that attend those schools. And it's been my good pleasure to to help people understand what that is, how it impacts school performance, and why we are working so hard to see that schools are equipped to address it.
You've discussed some, like trauma.
Mm-hmm.
What are the issues that are of top concern for the NAACP?
Well, originally the NAACP stood against the lynching of people in this country back at the founding of the NAACP in 1909.
Is that how it came into existence?
It was preceded by a group mainly African American called the Niagara Movement. And those persons who participated in that were also participants in the founding of the NAACP, but W.E.B. Du Bois and I.B. Wells and persons of that caliber and historically competent at the turn of the century to pull together an advocacy group. Mary Wright Ovington, a social worker in New York, highly disturbed by lynchings, asked people from that movement and others to meet with her, and they founded the NAACP in 1909. While we don't have a tremendous amount of overt lynching right now, we still have social justice issues that have tremendous impact on minorities and the poor. So we are concerned, of course, about health issues. We are concerned, we genuinely believe that one of the top health issues affecting this entire country is the violence because of the ripple effect of gun violence. We hear about people who are killed, but we don't hear about those who survive and live their lives debilitated. We don't hear about the hundreds of millions of dollars of medical costs associated with this. We don't hear about the trauma then that implodes the entire family. Children sitting in school beset by this horrific chaos and pain and confusion to the point where it impacts and impedes their school performance, both academically and socially. It is a medical condition, and it has tremendous impact on a person's interpersonal behaviors and the fact that the entire physiology is disturbed, and it's very difficult to learn or to make decisions. We have an entire understanding of adverse childhood experiences and the pyramid that shows that the experiences disrupt the neurological development, that then people begin to make self-destructive social decisions. It leads to chronic diseases and to early death. We must address it. And we maintain, if we can address it in children and help them learn to manage it, that we won't have as chaotic and violent a society as we do now. And learning will be available to these children in a way that it is not when they're in the throes of these emotional, psychological difficulties.
Is there any data, studies, or information that there's a disproportionate effect of trauma on minorities throughout society?
No, I have not learned that. What I have learned is that the study that was done by the CDC and Permanente, that the huge insurance concern. Okay, I'm just not calling up the first part of it, but okay.
Keep going, as you,
okay.
whatever, if you think of it, add it.
Kaiser
Okay.
Permanente.
Say that again.
The study done on adverse childhood experiences as a cooperation of the CDC and Kaiser Permanente was done amongst well-educated white people. And that's where they learned the impact of early childhood trauma on disease. So, that study that taught us about the impact of adverse childhood experiences was not done with the poor or particularly black people. And so this is a human issue. It is a human need for us to address this. Right now, with the opium crisis going on in this country, there's a reason why people are self-medicating. And usually one of the socially destructive and personally destructive behaviors of people who've suffered adverse childhood experiences is to self-medicate. And we have addiction to drugs, to alcohol, to sex, all sorts of difficulties that people impose on themselves because they have unresolved emotional, psychological pain. So it's time for this country to actually accept the condition we're in.
What other issues is the NAACP concerned with?
We are concerned with the environment. We have a focus called environmental justice, because in those areas where the poor and minorities live, the pollution levels have resulted in high levels of asthma, and other chronic diseases. So we work in the area of social justice: clean water, clean air, not having dumps and other places that produce toxins located in areas where minorities and the poor live. We are concerned about prisons and prison reform. Here in Pennsylvania, there are some pieces of legislature that have been in the pipeline for which we have advocated.
You said pipeline. Could you be specific?
The legislative pipeline.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I was thinking school to prison pipeline you were referring to. I wasn't sure.
Oh, that's okay. Because when you bring that up, this is one of the things that we talk about when we educate people around trauma. It's not just one of the traumatic experiences of many children is racism. The over-identification of minority kids for discipline and the harsh treatment that they receive, and the expulsion rates are higher for young people of color, and the implicit bias that people don't necessarily recognize in themselves, such that they see those things that black children do as being worse than if they're done by a kid who's not black or brown. And then those kids are punished. Other kids may not even be subject to disciplinary action. So it's complicated.
I had a sociologist discuss exactly what you just said. Dr. Howard Roboy came in and discussed the sociology of what he called deviant behavior and supported exactly what you just said. For my viewers, if anybody else wanted further information about your previous comment.
Okay, thank you.
I understand there's two other primary issues of concern.
One of those, Larry, is the gap in school funding in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania has the largest gap in school funding between well-funded schools and underfunded schools of any state in the nation. And so we did participate in a lawsuit against the legislative and executive branch concerning the privilege to sue them. Because historically in Pennsylvania, the court had held that this is a legislative issue and not a judicial issue. So when the state then began to impose punitive measures against students who could not score proficiently, while the state would not fund the schools to the level where they could give the students access to the information they needed to learn in order to score well, we joined a lawsuit under the Philadelphia Public Interest Law Center, and with other plaintiffs, a number of school districts, private families, the NAACP. And we did prevail in the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court did send the case back to Commonwealth Court, I believe I have this correct, for it to be litigated.
For more information on that, you actually appeared at a forum at William Penn High School, and you gave a discussion on that along with Dan. I don't have his name handy, but on Delaware County Political News there is your discussion along with the Public Interest Law Center's discussion for more detail.
Yes. Another place where we put a great deal of our focus is on economic empowerment. 30% of the African Americans in Pennsylvania live in poverty. And we do have a structured program that comes from the national office that provides grants to the state economic empowerment chair, who then distributes those working with Wells Fargo to local branches, and they go in and do economic development with the people in local areas. But one of the things I wanted to be sure to mention is our focus on voting. We do all we can to make sure people register to vote and that they are aware of the issues that are of importance on ballots, or that they understand that they need to meet and get to know candidates from the local level, state level, and the federal level. And we especially emphasize the essential nature of local elections and what we call off-year elections, because the local candidate is in a pipeline toward being a federal candidate. And we believe that all politics are local, and that the most impinging regulation and law that is passed, policy, is at the local level. We believe that judges need to be known and understood, and that when it is time to vote for judges, people should know who these people are and what their philosophies are.
Dr. Flynn, you made such a strong point that all politics are local, and you mentioned judicial power, which is one of the strongest branches of government. Can you give us another example of how all politics are local and why people should vote on those? We say off-year elections, but we mean local elections.
I had a friend who ran for city council in a borough not Media, but nearby. Her opponent and she had a tie, and they had to flip a coin to see which of them was going to be on the council.
Are you talking about Ridley Park this year?
No, actually, I'm talking about another place that I won't name it, but it's true.
Good lesson.
And had one of them, let's keep the numbers small, had one of them had 5 votes and one of them 4, the person with 5 votes would have won. But by example, they both had, say, 5, and so they flipped a coin to see who got the seat. It is important to vote. It is important to vote.
So let's talk about the one person who stays home on that local election that just made a difference. And in contrast, Dr. Duvall-Flynn, a presidential election where everybody loves to come out. Mm-hmm. What's the margin of victory? How many votes? Mm-hmm. Millions of votes.
Millions. You know, and
tens of millions.
Yes.
And
yes.
The margin of victory, hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands.
And depending on which the members of the electoral
college also.
College,
So
yeah.
it's even more
Yeah.
Watered down.
Right. And so it's important, and we can see that today without going into any in-depth discussion about what's going on. It's, I think, pretty clear to every American how important it is to vote in the national election. But it is extremely important to vote in your local election. Now, I think in 2018, if I'm not mistaken, I believe I'm correct, the entire Pennsylvania House is up for election. The House. And law is made there. Law is made there. Right now, there's something on board to relax the gun laws in Pennsylvania. So the philosophy of the persons who are running for your state rep, the philosophy of the persons who are running for the judgeships, the philosophies of the person who are running for county sheriff, the philosophies, their belief systems, are they aware of cross-cultural issues, and can they mitigate situations without violence? It's essential. Who's setting your taxes? You know, what philosophy is being held by the people who have the power to set your taxes? We're looking at that right now at the federal level. So you are really affecting 7 generations behind you or in front of you, whichever way you see it, if you do not go cast a vote for people who share your values and your philosophies.
Dr. Duvall-Flynn, you mentioned that voting is a tremendous solution and vehicle for societal change. What other vehicles of change does the NAACP use to help with these problems that you've listed?
We strongly believe that we must have a strong, healthy, universal public education system, because that should be where we learn to get along with people who are not like us, from different cultures. It is where we should learn how government works, how to problem solve, how to communicate, how to participate in a free society. And we strongly support universal public education. We don't believe that it's helpful to society to separate people and sort them out and have schools that have only one kind of child, you know, ethnically. Because how do you ever learn that we have more in common than we are different? Where would you learn that?
To what school level do you think that we should have universal free public education? How far through school?
Well, it would be a wonderful thing, an amazing, miraculous thing, if a person could study without to any level without being encumbered by debt. So when people are encumbered by debt, they have to make decisions that they may otherwise not have made. They may have to take trails that they otherwise would not have followed. So America, the United States of America, needs to have a serious conversation about educating our young people. There's no way to maintain a civil society without bringing people along who will participate in the essential institutions that maintain a civil society. You know, we must have people who are educators. We must have physicians. We must have people who love the law and will practice law and be judges. We must have people who want to make legislation, who understand the philosophy, the political foundations of this country. We must have people who are inclusive in their value system. They understand that this cannot be a country of all one ethnic population dominated by men. There are more women in the country than there are men, and there needs to be participation across ethnicities, across gender. And we must have compassion. We're too harsh. This is a very harsh country.
Dr. Duvall-Flynn, we're going to leave it there, but can you stay for a little bit longer while I ask you some more questions?
Be happy to do so.
Thanks. We have been here with Dr. Duvall-Flynn, and I am your host, Larry DeMarco. Please stay tuned for part 2. We are signing off. Tune in next time. Bye for now.